Well, good morning. It is a really special day for me and our family in a variety of ways, but a big part of that is today is Julie and I's anniversary. So we've been married for, I won't say how long, because then you'll know how old we are, and we'll try to keep that a little bit, close to the chest here. But really, really grateful to be able to celebrate as a family. We celebrate familyversary, celebrate together as a family, the starting of our family. And so part of anniversary for us is taking some time and just looking back at the journey, the steps that we've taken along the way. And this week we've been talking, Julie and I in particular, have been talking about one Christmas that's like one of our favorite, sweetest Christmases that we've maybe ever had. And it's Christmas 2003. And so the world was different back then, right? Our lives were different back then. We were just a young married couple expecting, we were 8 months into pregnancy, waiting for the arrival of our first daughter, Emily, and she was on the way, and we were expecting and excited for all of that. And we had moved, in that year, we had moved to Colorado to help plant a church in Aurora, Colorado. And so there was we're waiting for a baby to arrive. And we are waiting for the launch of a church that was going to be launched on Easter Sunday in that spring. And so it was all of this waiting that was happening in our world. It felt like everything in our lives was not yet. Right? Family was back in Indiana and Ohio, and we're trying to sort out what our lives look like, traditions that we have at Christmas time, all those things. So we're in this period of waiting, and I'll just say, then presents arrived. We had started shopping, we wrapped presents, they're under the tree. And it was when you pass the threshold of what you can tolerate, the arrival of wrapped presents for each other. We had purchased for each other, not much. We didn't have much to work with at that point, but we had purchased meaningful, thoughtful presents for each other, and they're just sitting under the tree. And here we are, waiting for everything in our lives at this moment. And so I'll never forget coming home from work. It was probably a Thursday or something. I come home from work and I walk in the door and I make eye contact with Julie, and she's like, "Can it just be Christmas now? Why December 25th? Can't we just decide as a couple, it's just us, nobody's around us. We don't even have to tell anybody that we're doing this. Could it just be Christmas right now?" And I'm looking at her, I'm pregnant mama, where all these people, it's we can do whatever, right? It's I need Christmas too. And so we get a coffee at a local coffee shop, we come home and we're okay, I guess Thursday afternoon is Christmas. Let's have Christmas together. And so we did, and we had this beautiful time, just very simple Christmas together. Man, waiting is hard, right? Waiting is hard. And it's actually not just that we wait, it's also how we wait. Right? What does it look like as we're waiting? What does it look like to approach life in a not yet time of our lives? Have you ever noticed that we can learn from things that we don't want to do? Right? That we can experience things that we'd rather not experience, and yet we learn things through them. And in fact, it might be some of the best learning that we ever do is in times that we would prefer not to ever be in. Isn't that frustrating? Waiting can form us. Waiting can teach us to trust. It can expose things in the not yet of our lives that actually are really easy to hide in times where we're not quite feeling the not yet so acutely. It brings things to the surface. And so Advent, part of why Advent is so important for us is it becomes an opportunity to be formed in the waiting. As we've been working our way through this series, I've been learning some things along the way personally. There's two things in particular I think are helpful and relevant for us this morning as I'm just unpacking my own journey in front of you. A few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, I talked about carrying a joy journal with me. And some of you actually, you've sent me messages, you've texted the church to let us know how you're navigating your joy journal, or how you're using it. Gotten some emails from some of you. And it's a really simple, just to give a quick recap. So all I do is I carry with me a little notebook. And when there are things that just are sparking joy in the world around me, where things where I see that there's something that's just taken place, whether it's a spiritual step that I've seen somebody take, or something one of my kids has done, or something Julie and I have experienced, or something that's happening in the world around me, and it's that's something that I need to remember It's so easy to miss and so easy to forget. And so I just have taken to like a simple bulleted list at the end of the day and just write down the things over the course of the day that brought joy. But what I'm learning about the joy journal is that it's not just that it's things that like bring joy to me. It's like we're getting a glimpse of the better right in the here and now. Right? It's like God revealing himself and revealing the better, even as we're experiencing the things that are hard here and now. So it's like holding on to them and letting them shape how I'm seeing the now. And so it's important for us. And I would encourage you, if you've not started to do this, just take stock on a regular basis, the things that God is doing that's good, that helps you trust him, that helps you see his hand at work in the world around you. And it's not denying the now. It's not denying that things are difficult. It's declaring that the now isn't all there is. The other thing I'm learning is that we're okay with waiting. As human beings, we're okay with waiting if we can see one of at least two things, or at least one of two things: purpose and progress. Which creates some tension for us when we talk about the Advent kind of waiting that we're experiencing, because we're remembering that God has promised that he would send his son. We're remembering that God promised that he would send his son, and he fulfilled his promise. Now we're waiting for God to send his son again, for Jesus to return to us. And so we're in this Advent waiting, and we feel this tension because we want to see purpose and we want to see progress. And when we say purpose, we don't just mean big picture purpose. We want to know the specific purpose of the specific experience that we're having in that moment. And we want to see progress, but that falls within the timeline that we would like to see God operate in. And that makes Advent waiting difficult because we're waiting for something that requires trust. We're waiting for something that doesn't fall cleanly into our timeline, that we are not in control of it, that we actually don't get to be the one who measures progress along the way. And so Advent waiting reveals our focus, and it helps us see where we're at as we're navigating our way through it. So centuries ago, the church was beginning to form. Jesus had come and lived and died and then had returned to heaven and sent his church out on mission. And the church had to wrestle with some things about who they were and how they were going to operate in the world around them, how they would take on the mission that God had placed in front of them. And in the midst of all of that wrestling and all those conversations, there were some leaders who started to write letters to the church that would help them understand how they should navigate life. Some were people who had walked with Jesus. Some were people who had walked closely with people who had walked with Jesus. And so they're writing these letters. Some of them writing letters telling the story of Jesus so that the church had a good record of what had happened. Others writing like Paul and James and others writing to help the church understand the kind of people they were supposed to be. Not just church as organization, but church as a community, as a group of people on mission, living life as God intended them to live their lives. And so James is one of the ones who wrote letters to the church. And James writes to the church with the specific purpose of helping them make sense of how they should live in the time that they are waiting between Jesus' life, death, resurrection, return to heaven, and when he would come again. James says this is how you're supposed to live. He's teaching about this very specific and very relevant waiting for us, making sense of how to be people of God in a world that would prefer that we not operate like that. Waiting for Jesus to return and fully and finally make all things new. Living our lives in a time when everything that's wrong reminds us that we're not there yet, right? 2,000 years ago, wrestling with and working through the same kinds of challenges. And so in James chapter 5, as James is writing to the church and helping them understand, not just like waiting, but also dealing with the struggles and dealing with persecution and dealing with being mistreated, dealing with hardship along the way. He writes this as he puts pen to paper and writes to the church. He says this, "Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains." Be patient. When life is hard, when life is going in ways that you would prefer it not to go, when you're experiencing things that are difficult, is there anything that you want to hear less than be patient? Right? It's like, you could just imagine they're reading this letter that James wrote to the church, and it's like, do we really have to go on? I mean, I don't know that James has anything to offer to us if what he's telling us to do is to be patient. Right? It's hard out there. and we're being mistreated and we're experiencing things and we're walking through stuff that just isn't fair. And here's what James has to offer us. Be patient. And then he begins to paint this story, tell a story of a farmer. But he says, be patient until the coming of the Lord. So it's not just like marking a spot on a calendar saying we just have to get through until we get to. It's not just waiting for a moment. So you are waiting for the arrival of Jesus and everything that his arrival brings with it, right? You're not just waiting for the end of waiting. You're waiting for Jesus to show up and everything that means for the way that the world will be with his return. It's not just that you have a date circled on a calendar or a moment that you're looking forward to. It's not what you're anticipating on the date. It's what will actually happen on that date. When I was a kid, one of the things that our family did, my mom was really, really into growing our own vegetables. She would do everything she could. We have a big garden, and we would garden all summer long, and we would can, and we would save, and we would use, and have fresh vegetables, and vegetables that we stored up. And so it was a big part of our childhood was taking care of the garden. Well, my brothers and I have two brothers, and my mom one year, I don't know if she was just tired of dealing with a big garden or was tired of dealing with us because we had too much energy and we needed something to focus our efforts on. But she said, so Nate, you get this section of the garden, and Steve, you get this section, and Matt, you get this section. And so you can plant in that garden whatever you want. Sweet. Because think about this. And so we're all processing. We go to the gardening store and we pick our seeds. We're studying. We're going to the library, seeing what kind of conditions the things that we want to grow need to be in and come up with our plan. And so we plant these plants, and my brothers have their sections and I have my section. And things start to happen, right? Things are growing, and we're working and tending, and we're farming here, right? This is like a big deal for us. And so my brothers grew things that were really useful, like probably things that we actually ate at meals that were like helpful and contributing to our family's menu. Nate's section, I grew parsley. And I had a reason for it. Like we always have reasons for why we do things. I grew parsley, and the reason I grew parsley, because you can imagine the conversation, like why? You're going to go through all that effort to grow parsley. Actually, no. I'm going through all of this effort. I'm doing all of this work so I can have a fancy breakfast whenever I want. Because here's the picture that was in my mind. When we would go, every once in a while, our family would go out to eat, and we would go primarily at breakfast time, and we'd go to a diner called Farmer Jack's, and we would go, and when they would bring out the eggs and the bacon and the toast, the last thing the chef would do, I'm sure it was a chef at this diner, the last thing they would do is they were like putting together this fancy breakfast, was they would put a sprig of parsley. Do you guys remember? Maybe some of you remember when restaurants used to like be real restaurants and really take like the time to get things right. They would put this little sprig of parsley on the edge of the plate, like garnish. And I just remember thinking parsley is so cool. Like what a plant. I mean, that is like the thing. And so I grew parsley because I wanted to be able to have a fancy breakfast whenever I wanted to have breakfast. And so I farmed, and I waited for the early and the late rains. I did all the things that James is describing with what it means to farm, because I was anticipating not just parsley coming up through the ground. I was anticipating fancy breakfasts. Whenever I had this picture of my family just sitting around the table for some breakfast on a Saturday morning and looking and seeing that sprig of parsley on the side of their plate, and they're like, "Boy, Nate, thank you." We just thank you. Wow. I Googled this week. They say that putting parsley on a plate is old-fashioned. And I just think the world has moved on from something that was very special and needs to come back. It's like we need to bring this back. But brings us to our first principle of joy. It's this: joy is living with a what will be perspective in the here and now. Right? Our joy is rooted in what will happen, not just that something will happen that will mean it's the end of waiting. It's a principle that we can hang a lot of stuff on in our lives. To say, I will live with a what will be perspective in the here and now. I'll have a joy that's rooted not just in what I'm experiencing and whether or not what I'm experiencing is fun. I'll look beyond that and say, I'm looking forward to something. James says, see how the farmer waits. He says patience for the fruit, but also for the rains that bring it to completion. The farmer isn't just waiting for the harvest, he's waiting for the precious fruit the harvest will bring. And so that anticipation means waiting. It's doing the work in the meantime and until it receives both the early and the late rains. And neither of those rains are actually under the control of the farmer at all. Right? They can't make the rain happen, the early or the late rain. And so the good farmer leverages his most important tool, patience. Patience is hopeful endurance. It's operating in the not yet filled with joy and expectation. Like you can imagine a conversation with a farmer who's waiting for precious fruit to come at the harvest. It's like, what are you waiting for? Or what are you doing? And the farmer would respond, I'm preparing for the fruit that will come at the harvest. Right? Not always just like digging in the dirt, not always actively doing things, but always, in whatever else is happening, waiting for the precious fruit that the harvest will bring. Or for this parsley farmer, I'm waiting for a fancy breakfast. And so when it's time to work. When it's time to wait. But in all of it, patience, hopeful endurance, filled with joy and expectation. And just in case with the story of the farmer, we would forget what James was calling us to. He says, so you also, verse 8, be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. James doesn't want the instruction to get lost in the story. He says, so we can understand the patience that the farmers need to have and the way they operate. He says, so you also, remember, you also, like that, be patient. And there's another sort of agricultural metaphor that's at play in this conversation that James is having with the church. He's saying, plant patience. Let it take root. And as we unpack the rest of what James has to say, we'll see what the fruit is as we get to that. But here's the principle that's at play in this. Joy is expressed in patient endurance. Right? Joy is expressed in patient endurance. Patience isn't just that we wait. It's how we wait. Right? It's not just behavior, like what do we do or what does this look like to wait? It's not a behavior issue, it's a heart issue. Who are you? And what are you becoming? And who are you becoming as you wait? And so we don't put a date on the calendar or mark off days and say we're just killing time until the arrival. It's not how long you have to wait. It's what will you do and who will you become in the waiting. How about this as a start, as James talks to the church? These are obviously people who are not anything like us. They had all sorts of issues 2,000 years ago. We have sorted out all of them. Here's what he had to say to the church 2,000 years ago. He says, so do not grumble against one another, brothers, so you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. Can you imagine 2,000 years ago when the church would have to experience things that they would prefer not to have to experience? They wouldn't just get frustrated about the way things were. They would actually grumble about each other. Can you believe that? Like they would have like differences of opinion and they would have moments where there was tension that would be created between them and the way things were. And they would not just look at the tension that they were experiencing, but they would actually get frustrated and grumble about each other. So James had to tell them something that maybe we could learn something from. But he says, so don't grumble against each other. Don't take your frustration that you're experiencing about the way things are and turn it towards other people who you're on this journey with. Earlier in James' letter to the church, in chapter 1, he talks about letting trials and difficulty do its work in you. He says that actually it's best that you let it do its whole job in your life. James 1, 2-4, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So take the opportunity when things aren't as you hoped they would be to be formed by it, to allow God to form you in it. It's okay, actually, to express frustration with how things are, to acknowledge that life is hard, to acknowledge that things are difficult. But it is not okay to take that frustration and turn it towards each other. We are being formed in the meantime. And so the question is, into what are we being formed? And so when things get tough, when the waiting gets too long, when things are happening to us or not happening that we would like to see happen, what comes out of us? Is it joyful endurance? Or is it grumbling directed at other people who are on the journey with us? One is good fruit, the other is rotten in every way. How about this principle? Joy grows in community. Right? Joy grows in community. The fruit of our lives actually can impact the fruit of the lives of those around us, and vice versa. A wise farmer doesn't just watch his own field. A wise farmer pays attention to the neighbor's field too, what's happening in that field, because there are things that will begin to bleed over, things that will begin to emerge in his field if there's things that are happening in the field next to him. And so if you find yourself surrounded by negativity, right? You go and it's like in every conversation that I find myself in, it's like everybody's grumbling. Everywhere I go, people are frustrated and surly. Everywhere I go, people are like on edge and just grumpy. Everywhere I go, there's at least one grumpy person, right? Guess what? But here's the good news. Joy can spread too. So this year, like a month ago, we sent our youngest daughter to spend some time with her sisters while they were in college, to be able to have just a bit of an experience, just see what college life is like for them and those kinds of things. And so she was spending a week leading up to Thanksgiving with her sisters in Indiana. And Julie and I are home. And some of you who are empty nest know what this feels like. This was like a shocking experience for us, how quiet our home was. And so we said everything we had to say to each other. That took like 15 minutes. And then we're like, and now what? What do we do? And so we're waiting, and it's like quiet house of touch and a taste of empty nest. And I remember looking at Julie and I said, I don't know what you need, like from a resource standpoint. Whatever it takes, could you just make it feel like Christmas around here? Like do something, like, because my wife, if you spend some time with her, she's like just absolutely precious in all kinds of ways. But one of the things that she does really, really well is create environments that just feel really special. And so here we are, just the two of us in our home, and it's quiet, and I need to be reminded that Christmas is coming. And it's like before Thanksgiving, and some of you I know have issues about decoration for Christmas before, like whatever, Christmas is beautiful and we should enjoy it as long as we feel like we need to enjoy it. So she decorates for Christmas, and she just has this beautiful touch in how she does this. And she created this environment, so we got to experience it, and then our kids came home for Thanksgiving, and it's like, welcome to Thanksgiving, but also with this beautiful touch of Christmas all around, because I needed not just to know that Christmas was coming, I needed to be surrounded by reminders that my kids were coming, right? That my girls were coming home. And Christmas is a great reminder of that. So it wasn't just that I was looking forward to a moment. I needed to be reminded. And I actually needed my wife to remind me that Christmas is coming, that my kids are coming home. And Julie, in her joyful decoration for Christmas, her Christmas joy brought joy for me as well. So James writes this reminder with a sense of urgency. He gives us this needed reminder. He says, the judge is at the door. We can get really good at waiting. We can take a posture where we're really okay with, I'm just going to bide my time, and I'm just the not yet, and we have a long way to go. But James is keeping this tension of the nearness of Christ's return in their minds. He says it's important that we be ready for the long haul, but it's also important that we be ready for right now. And so James talks about being a community who waits well. James talks about being a community who doesn't turn and be frustrated with each other, but reminds each other of the things that they're waiting for and what it is that they're supposed to be doing in the meantime. And when he talks about community and a people who are waiting well, who are patient, he's talking about not just the here and now community, he's talking about those who have come before them and those who will come after them. And it's like James is doing what we're doing this morning. He's saying, look at those who have gone before us and who have gotten it right. And he gives two examples. He gives the examples of the prophets and of Job. And he starts with the prophets. He says, as an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. James could have chosen from all of the history of the people of God, like any number of people to use as an example. But he chooses the prophets, this very specific group of people within the story of the people of God. And I think part of why he does this is that some people, right, martyrs and people who would have laid down their lives, they lost their lives. But prophets, they tended to have a little bit different experience. Some of them did lose their lives for their message, but many of them had to actually live on in patient endurance as they suffered the consequences of their obedience. Right? God spoke to the prophets, and many times it was, you have this word to bring to the people of God to speak correctively about things that are happening and the things that are being done. And you're going to speak sometimes to kings, sometimes to people who are not going to like what you have to say, and they're going to have the ability to make life miserable for you. And you're going to have to be obedient. And then you're going to have to live with the consequences of your obedience. So James is pointing to these prophets who have suffered the consequences of their obedience. It takes an incredible amount of courage to lay down one's life for the sake of God's call, right? Whether that means death or it means living it out for the rest of your life. And so James is reminding the church of people who have not just died, but who have had to live on in the consequences of living out their obedience that God has placed in front of them. He says, behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you've seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. He says, we remember those who remain steadfast. We consider them blessed. Not just blessed because they had to be steadfast, but blessed because they endured to the end. Every person that James is referring to by the time that he wrote this letter to the church would have died, so they have endured to the end. So he's pointing to their blessed lives and giving those who are still working their way through all of the things that they're navigating some perspective as they make choices about how to approach their lives. James says those hero stories are simply beautiful stories of people who chose to remain steadfast to the very end. Right? Sometimes we look at our stories and we're like, how could my story fit in any kind of way with these big, beautiful stories that we read about in Scripture? He says, here's what they did. They saw the hardship and they saw what was in front of them, and they just simply remained steadfast, and it's beautiful. And so whatever it is that we're facing, we can make that same sort of choice. And with that word steadfast, the farmer metaphor comes to its completion. It says the seed, patience, bears fruit at last, steadfastness, joyful endurance. He says, you've heard of these stories, the prophets and Job. Job had to navigate and experience all sorts of hardship, and he trusted God while experiencing some of the hardest things that we could possibly imagine. And here's what drives all of those stories. Joy is a character issue. It's trusting the character of God even when life is hard. It's a character issue. It's trusting the character of God even when life is hard. Two things that are true. Life can be hard, and God is good. Those things don't cancel each other out. Right? You can't say, well, when life is good, I can trust that God is good. Life can be hard, right? Beyond our imagination hard sometimes, and God is good. And the difficulty of life never changes the goodness of God. And so joy is a character issue, the character of God, but it's also a character issue for us. Our character in the hard times reveals what we know and believe about the character of God. So James says, you have seen the purpose of the Lord, his compassion and his mercy. The prophets and Job probably would have been surprised to show up in this letter. Right? When they lived their lives, when they followed through in obedience, when they suffered and endured, they weren't thinking that, man, centuries potentially from now, people are going to be telling my story and remembering what I did in the midst of hardship. They would have been probably surprised to show up in this letter. But I think they would have been okay with it only because it meant that their lives centuries after their lives were still pointing to the trustworthiness of God, centuries after they trusted him with their lives. Which brings us to principle 5. Joy may not be natural to all of us, but it can become natural for all of us. I can hear it as we talk about joy. I know some of you actually almost like have decided to take on a personality of I will never smile, right? I'll never have fun. Like joy is just not natural for me. So I can hear it now. It's like, that's just not who I am. Well, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be, right? Like just because it's not natural to us doesn't mean that it's not supposed to be true of us. The Bible would actually be a really short book if it was just simply trying to help us do what was natural to us. Right? It'd be like one page. Actually, you could look at the first few chapters of the Bible. It shows exactly what's natural to us. And the rest of the Bible is dealing with the consequences of doing what comes naturally to us. But the Bible would be a pretty short book if it was just about us doing what felt natural or what came natural to us. And so as we move from this conversation, there's a few things that we can put into practice in our lives that can help us live this out in a faithful kind of way. And when we talk habits, we're talking joy. I'm not saying so smile more or put on a happy face and just deal with the things that are coming your way. There are 4 specific habits. I'm not saying you have to do all 4 of them, but take hold of maybe one of these. And say, I'm going to take this, I'm going to put this into practice in my life and see what God can do in and through my life as I take hold of this. So habit 1, how about this? It's a perspective habit. Make a habit out of reminding yourself that this is not the whole story, right? Whatever it is you're experiencing, the here and now, this is not the whole story. Whether it's hardship, whether it's beautiful times, saying there is more happening. This is not the whole story. Live in the here and now with your eyes focused on the what will be. This is anticipating the fruit of the harvest in our lives, not just getting through life, but anticipating precious fruit of the things that God will do. How about a patient habit? What if we made a habit out of refusing to wish time away? We will not wish time away. I refuse to wish time away. We'll use the time that God has given us. We will find purpose in the time that God has given us. Instead, say, God, I trust you between now and better. What do you want to do in my life in the meantime? I refuse to wish time away. I refuse to wish time away. I will use the time that God has given me to make a habit out of being unwilling to just release time. Joyful endurance, steadfast to the end. How about the community habit? Find and fight for your people. Right? Make a habit out of being intentional about who is around you and how your life is shaping their lives and how their lives are shaping your lives. Say, I'm gonna make sure I'm with people who can help me navigate life in a way that honors God with my life. So whether that's table time or a small group or finding a one-on-one relationship with somebody who can help you see what's hard for you to see, give you perspective and help you live your life in the way that God has created you to live your life. So I will find and I will fight for the people who God has called me and invited me to live in a relationship with. To take a proactive instead of reactive approach to community. And then the character habit. To make time, to make a habit out of making time to get to know God. And then don't just know things about God, but make a habit out of getting to know God and then applying what you know about God to what you're experiencing. Saying, look, I want to get to know God. And then when I experience things and hard things and good things and beautiful things and difficult things, all of it, I want to experience that and I want to make sense of that, understanding who God is, what his character is like. Because joy is a character issue, trusting the character of God even when life is hard. James gives the church a simple reminder. He says, the Lord is compassionate and merciful. And you can build your life on God's compassion and on his mercy. You can live with joy because God is compassionate and merciful.